Good morning. Thanks so much for your interest in this LeadingAge Virginia update on Virginia's recent unprecedented special session of the General Assembly. I'm Dana Parsons, Vice President and Legislative Counsel with LeadingAge Virginia, and joining us today is Alicia Cundiff with Spots Fane. Alicia and I will provide a brief update on some of the key legislation that was approved by the General Assembly and our Governor Ralph Northam that impacts the continuum of aging services. Alicia, could you please share how Spots Fane supports LeadingAge Virginia at the General Assembly and why this special session was needed?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for letting me speak today. So I work at Spots Fane and we represent LeadingAge Virginia in the Virginia General Assembly. And what that means is we provide government relations services and represent LeadingAge and their agenda and their priorities and their goals, both within the General Assembly, but also to regulatory agencies and the legislative branch. And then secondly, why this special session was needed. Firstly, it was needed because of COVID-19 and the budget. The budget essentially needed to be completely reforecasted, and that was the original reason that Governor Northam called the General Assembly in to meet, was to redo the budget. And then to also have an opportunity to introduce any legislation related to COVID-19, which is some of the bills that we're going to discuss later on in this presentation. The second reason that the special session was needed was after the death of George Floyd and the racial reconciliation that our nation has been going through, the General Assembly members felt it was important to also address issues of criminal justice and social justice. So those were the two reasons, the budget and COVID-19, and then secondly, issues of criminal and social justice.
Thank you, Alicia. Could you please also talk with us about the legislation that was approved that requires the Commissioner of Health to make information available on a public website when the governor declares an emergency in response to a communicable disease such as COVID-19?
Yes, so there were two pieces of legislation that passed related to this. The first one, which you're looking at now, is specific to the state of emergency that we're currently under in response to COVID-19. And it requires the Commissioner of Health to make available on VDH's website by week and by health district several pieces of data. The name of the reporting entity, so that means that the assisted living facility or the nursing home would have to be named. The total number of confirmed cases by COVID-19, the number of confirmed cases by age group and race and ethnicity, and the percentage of cases that are known to be associated with a nursing home, assisted living facility, or correctional facility. The bill also requires the commissioner to provide analysis around the reporting of that data, such as case incidence rate, percentage of PCR tests that are positive, the rate of COVID-like illness visits to the ER, the rate of confirmed COVID-19 ICU hospitalizations, and the percentage of hospital beds that are currently occupied. And then the second piece of legislation is a little bit broader, but it does not require as much data to be reported. So it's broader in that it applies to any state of emergency in response to a communicable disease of public health threat. Whereas the first bill that we just talked about was just specific to the state of emergency that we're in with COVID-19. However, this bill only requires a couple things to be reported: the name of the reporting entity, the number of confirmed cases, and the number of deaths resulting from the communicable disease of public health threat. Also, what is different about this bill is that it had an emergency clause included. So this went into effect when the governor signed it. So this is already in effect. The previous bill that we just discussed will go into effect in March.
Thank you, Alicia. So moving on to other legislation that was approved during the 2020 General Assembly special session is related to immunity from civil liability. This legislation provides the absence of gross negligence or willful misconduct that licensed adult days, assisted livings, home cares, or hospices have been extended civil liability. Currently, Virginia Code already extends liability protections to certain medical providers, including nursing homes, during a disaster and emergencies, except in cases of gross negligence or willful misconduct. This legislation contains an emergency clause and was effective upon the governor's approval on October 13th of this year. This legislation, the civil immunity, is provided only to causes of action arising between March 20th of this year and such time as the declaration of a state emergency related to COVID-19 virus set forth in Executive Order 51 is no longer in effect. Another very interesting measure that was passed during this special session requires the State Board of Health to amend its regulations governing nursing homes and hospices to require that during a public health emergency related to COVID-19, that each nursing home and hospice establish a protocol to allow residents and patients to receive visits. LeadingAge Virginia is currently serving on the regulatory panel that is working directly with the Department of Health to develop these regulations. LeadingAge Virginia is also working with our Public Policy Committee to ensure that these regulations reflect requirements that will ensure positive aging for all Virginians. As soon as the final recommendations are approved, we will share that information with the membership. However, at this time, we do have some information related to the draft recommendations. The protocol must include the following 4 provisions describing the conditions, including conditions related to the presence of COVID-19 in the nursing home and hospice, under which in-person visitations will be allowed, and under which in-person visits will not be allowed, and visits will be required to be virtual. The requirements that in-person visitors will be required to comply to protect the health and safety of residents and patients and staff of the nursing home or hospice. The types of technology, including interactive audio or video technology, and staff support necessary to ensure the visits are provided. And last, the steps that the nursing home or hospice facility must take in the event of a service interruption or documented emergency that prevents visits from occurring. The protocol also must include a statement of the frequency of the visits, including virtual and in-person, that will be allowed, which shall be at least once every 10 calendar days for each resident or patient. A provision authorizing a resident or patient or the resident's or patient's personal representative to waive or limit visitation, provided that the waiver or limitation is included in the resident's or patient's health record. And a requirement that each nursing home or hospice publish on its website or communicate to each resident or patient or the resident's authorized representative in writing through electronic means that the nursing homes plan to accommodate visits. The governor has approved this legislation on October 21st. The bill does contain an emergency clause and requires the Department of Health to develop regulations to implement the provisions of this act to be effective within 200 days of its enactment. We will continue we have draft recommendations regarding the protocol, and we'll share that information with members as it becomes available. Alicia, could you give us a little bit of information about the status of the state budget?
Yes. So when COVID-19 originally hit, the budget was able to provide, the budget that was done in March was able to provide an additional $20 a day through Medicaid for nursing homes and assisted living facilities. And thankfully, with the budget that was just redone during this previous special session, that $20 a day has stayed in effect. and it has been extended through June 30th, 2021. So assisted living facilities and nursing homes will continue to receive that additional $20 a day through June 30th, 2021.
Great. Thank you, Alicia. Well, thank you for the opportunity today to provide you with the legislative and regulatory update. The next General Assembly session is scheduled to convene on Wednesday, January 13th of 2021, and we will be providing you more legislative updates at that time. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. My email address is here on the slide, and I'd be happy to assist. Thank you.